Good morning. Welcome to the Point. The 3rd Congressional District has drawn a big field of candidates. We've already introduced you to 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats. And this morning, 3 more Republicans, beginning with Joel Langlois. Tell me about your background, what you've done, what your career has looked like until you decided to run for Congress.
So I'm West Michigan native. You and I have crossed paths on a number of occasions. I own businesses in West Michigan. I started my first business when I was 18 years old. Raised my kids here. We foster parented here. We've done lots of different things. You and I are probably close to the same age. I have 40 years of business experience in town and lots of different operations. I have real estate, manufacturing, and entertainment.
So with that kind of broad stroke, you are involved in a lot of things, including the Deltaplex,
yes,
which is a venue that we've been at for many occasions, including those of candidate and President-elect Trump, who has visited there. Talk to me a little bit about that association and what, if any, connection his appearances there or your association with those appearances has to do with you running for Congress.
Well, he obviously was in our building 3 times during the cycle, during the 16 election cycle. Probably the first major Michigan rally was in our building in December of 2015. I've been a Trump fan since day one. I'm a business guy. I'm also in real estate, so his background attracted me. I personally was thinking for a long time it's time to get rid of politicians and put business people in charge. And so when he decided to run, I thought it was a great idea. So I've been supporting him from day one. We reached out to the campaign when we knew he was going to be making a tour, and we asked him to come and be in our building, and we put on some pretty good events for him. So yeah, that's my association with the building. That's my association with the president, and I'm a supporter. And again, I think his background is the right background for what we need today.
So with all of that behind you, why now? I appreciate, and as I've talked with each of the candidates, there is an opportunity. You don't always have an open seat from a Republican and Democratic side, even though Congressman Amash says he is going to run as an independent. But since both major parties do not have candidates, there'll be primaries on both sides. So why beyond opportunity did you decide to get?
Well, I for a couple of reasons. I see the problems. The opportunity is the big one. I think Justin has not represented our district. I think he's, when he came out against or in favor of impeaching the president, I thought that was pretty low. He's actually been a opponent of our president since the inauguration. I mean, it was a short time afterwards where he said he acted like a 5th grader or something like that, and I thought that was totally unprofessional. So I think Justin has not done a favor for our district. The last cycle, I was thinking about running because I'm one of those guys that sees a problem and wants to step up and fix it. Given my background, my real estate background, and my just employing people and understanding real-world issues, I thought I was a good fit, or I think I'm a good fit for the seat. The last cycle, my business world wasn't really aligned all that well. This cycle, it lines up pretty well. I've sold a few things. I've slowed down. I've gotten my businesses are running smoothly and strongly without me. In fact, I kind of get in the way sometimes when I'm around there. So it's time for me to move on and do something. I also feel like I'm being called. And, there's certain things that have lined up for me, and that kind of sends me a message that maybe it's time for me to step up and offer service back to the community and to the country.
The district, as it is drawn now, stretches from Battle Creek up through Grand Rapids. There's quite a bit of diversity in that district. What are some of the main issues that you as a congressman would like to work on in benefit of the district? Because what Calhoun County needs may differ greatly from what Kent County needs, for example.
So there's a few things. One, because of my small business background, I understand the needs of the small business guy. I look at, our employment in our country is around 50%, slightly less are employed by small businesses. West Michigan has a lot of small businesses. And so as small business people, we when government regulation comes down, it affects us. Bigger businesses are able to absorb regulations a little more than the small business guy, who oftentimes sees a huge burden because of that. So that's one of my big things. The other thing is, as a small business guy, I am constantly looking at ways of keeping my costs in line, understanding that I have to operate under a budget, and I see that as a problem in Washington. You know, the budget is out of control. There's government waste everywhere you look, and I think I can help identify that and work toward repairs. And the other thing is, I think our district has not been represented over the last 8+ years by our current congressman. And you know, we need to have someone there who's willing to represent the people. I have a friend of mine who served in Vietnam, who's currently has terminal cancer. He received a medal in Vietnam, did not receive that medal, and was trying to get the medal. He called me, how do I do it? I said, call your congressman. They should be able to do it for you. He made multiple attempts to contact Amash's office, was not able to do it. I suggested he contact a different congressman who was able to get him taken care of right away outside of the district that he votes in, which is unfortunate. But that's the problem that we have right now with our current congressman. He is not representing our district, and we need him to.
Part of the challenge that you will face beyond running in a primary, if successful, running in a general, and if you're successful there, part of the biggest challenge is trying to figure out how to navigate a polarized Washington, D.C. You identified yourself as a supporter of President Trump. As such, you will be in diametric opposition, or have opposition, from some who have been opposed to the president from the moment he announced his candidacy, as is the case for a lot of politicians. But how do you, in that kind of environment, build consensus? Because ultimately, you got to get to 218 votes to get anything done in the House.
Right. So one of the things I've learned over the last 40 years of being in business is, just because I may have a difference of opinion or a different concept of how things are being done doesn't mean I have to dislike the person. I think that the reality is, at least this is what we're supposed to be doing, is we're all supposed to be trying to make lives better for Americans. And I think there's a reality that there are a number of issues that we can find common cause with everybody across the aisle. USMCA is a good example. I'm glad it was finally passed yesterday, but it's that's a good example of what's right for America is what we should be working on. I think there's a lot of issues, from opioids to opioid crisis that we have, to fixing our immigration system, maybe not getting everything that both sides want, but there are probably some areas of compromise that could happen. But I think there's a number of issues that I think if you go in and have a conversation with somebody who maybe you don't necessarily agree with their politics on a one-to-one basis, that you probably would be able to gain some traction on consensus in some areas.
We're back with more 3rd District hopefuls next. To the Point. Welcome back to the Point. Among that big field of GOP candidates running for their party's nomination in the 3rd Congressional District, State Representative Lynn Afendoulis. Representative, we're going to start where I do all of these interviews, with your background. Now, clearly, we've had this opportunity before when you ran for the State House. But for the benefit of anybody who is watching now who has not yet met you, yes, tell me about your background and how you got to the point where you're running for the United States House.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm born and raised in this area, lived in this area, and worked in here almost all my life. I went to Michigan State University, got a job or a degree in journalism, and my first jobs out of college were as a newspaper reporter, Grand Rapids Press and the Tampa Tribune, and then I went into business. And for the last 26 years, I have worked as Director of Corporate Communications for Universal Forest Products, and have engaged a lot in the community. And I've loved my community service. That was really part of my job. I was fortunate that was part of my job. I've loved that, and I had the opportunity to take it to the next level when I went to the state, and now I have an opportunity to do even more than that. I have 2 children, and they're very supportive of this, and that's it in a nutshell.
Well, it is good because it becomes a real full-time job. Now, you've already run for office, so you get a sense of what it's like.
Yes.
But why did you decide now? And again, I point out each time that the choices that Congressman Amash has made by stepping away from the Republican Party created opportunity.
Sure.
But beyond opportunity, why are you running now?
Well, as I said before, I've engaged in this community for quite a bit of time, and I know what it's like when we have engaged representation and leadership, and we haven't had that in a while, and we've felt that, and I want to bring us back to that kind of engaged representation in Washington, D.C., and this was the right opportunity for me to do that. And I also, I look at the field, and I just know I've got the broadest, strongest base of experience, and I wanted to bring that to the campaign and to Washington.
Let's talk a little bit about this district. With all of the candidates, I've talked about the diversity of it. Certainly is a big difference from Calhoun County all the way up through Ionia and here in Grand Rapids. When you look at this district, what does it need? And I know it may not be the same thing in each sector of the district because there are different needs, but what are some of the important issues here?
Well, I think critically, it needs somebody who's going to listen. It's going to and learn the needs of the district. And you're right; they're very different depending on where we're at in the district. But as I said, being that engaged leader and that engaged representative is very important. And the needs are the same. We need to have a strong economy. We need to have safe communities. We need to have opportunities for our children, and all of those things in each of our communities. How we get to there in each of our communities might be a little bit different.
How you get along in Washington is a question that comes to mind when you think about going to serve in a body that is, particularly as you and I are sitting here, really at odds with itself. And while a lot of things can be achieved, it generally takes some bipartisan cooperation. How do you build that in an era of very deep polarization?
I think you approach things with respect, and you approach people with respect, and you approach the job with respect and the gravity that you're sent there for. I mean, we are paying our representatives to get things done on our behalf, and things aren't happening. This Congress has done nothing, and except for vote to impeach the president. And I think that if you have respect for those who are on the other side, and I have experienced this now in my own role in Lansing, you get things done, and maybe not everything that you want to get done, but you can move the ball, and I think that it's simple and it's critical and it works.
Economics are always a question in Washington. The deficit continues to grow. The interest on the deficit continues to grow. Neither party seems capable of even slowing, forget about stopping, but slowing the spending. Is there a pathway for that if you're in Washington?
Of course, that's a difficult question, and it's much bigger than any one person, but I think we just need to have bold leadership in Washington that is willing to say, time, we don't have the money for this, just like we do in our own homes. If you're going to spend on something and you don't have the money for it, you find a place where you might, and make cuts and balances so that you can afford it. And that's a simple answer, but it is that simple to some extent.
You've had your share of experience with budgeting at the state level, even though you're relatively new at it. This has been an interesting year and an interesting time to test that. Was it, I don't want to talk about difficulty, how much different was the budgeting process and what you saw happening, and even what you saw happening at the end of the year when some of those budgets were restored? How much different is that at the government level than it is in the private sector where you?
Well, you have many more cooks in the kitchen, that's for sure. But the principles are the same, of course. You need to be efficient with your dollars and responsible with your dollars. This process was nothing that I expected. It was different in many ways, I think, and I think everybody in the House would say that. I'm really glad that we were able to. I mean, we've passed a bipartisan budget that was really rewarding, and I'm glad we were able to restore many of the cuts from the governor's vetoes, because those were hurting some of the folks who least could afford it.
And a bit off the campaign trail, but a little bit about Lansing. When you go back in January, are there likely to be more discussions about restoration? There are still some things not funded.
You know, I will look to leadership to do that. I was really pleased that many of the things that affect this community and my district were restored, and I'm heartened by that. To the extent that we're going to go back and do more, I couldn't tell.
You know about knocking doors. You've been doing this already. You get about 30 seconds to make your case. That's how we end this interview. Make your case.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, you know, as I said, I have lived and worked here all my life. I love this community. I am the grandchild of immigrants, people who came here legally, worked really hard, and loved this country, and sent their kids to school and their sons to war. And I believe to some extent we are fighting for the very fabric of what they came here for and what we stand for. And I want to protect that. I want to participate in encouraging that the things that we do and the policies that we have are strengthen America and are about the American dream and who we are. And that's one of the main reasons I look forward to going to Washington, D.C.
We'll be back with more To The Point. Welcome back to The Point. Our final candidate running in the Republican primary this morning, Joe Farrington. Let's start with the basics. Introduce yourself to a viewing audience that may not yet know who you are. Tell us about your background. What have you done up to this point?
My background is that of business. I have a business degree. After college, was a financial advisor, certified, licensed, Series 7. And from there, just went into sales and went into education. And I was a school teacher from 2007 through 2013. At that point, I bought a bar through an online auction, real estate auction, and well, I got a text message. I said, "Congratulations, you bought a bar."
You won the bid.
That's right. So moved up from Tampa to Michigan and I was born and raised here. Not in the west part of the state, but in the Detroit area. And it was quite a culture shock in regards to going from the smallest town that I've ever lived in was Tallahassee, state capital of Florida, to a town or a village that has a population of just shortly over 300 houses. So it was a very welcome change. And as far as the bar goes, when I bought it, I heard the reputation that it used to have, and I made it very clear that the old reputation is dead and gone, and going to clean up the riffraff, and well, it's going to be a place that we can all be proud of and enjoy, and that's been the case.
Interesting selection of experiences that you come from, because obviously that's a varied background. So from that, how do you decide to run for Congress? And by the way, this isn't the first time you've done this.
No, it isn't. This isn't the first time I ran. The first time I ran was in 2018. I ran against Justin Amash. And the reason, it's not the only reason, there's probably a handful of different reasons. Just a quick one, representation. I don't see folks such as myself or my customers being represented in Congress, especially in West Michigan. I don't see the working class. I don't see folks that work. I mean, last night I worked till 3 in the morning, and I was up this morning just working again. I work from 8:30 to 3 o'clock in the morning almost every day, and that's not a complaint. I enjoy working, but at the same time, I don't feel that's being represented. And to get back to the question, why? One of the reasons why was exactly 2 years ago, as of yesterday. It was December 12th, and it was the Alabama election for Senate. And it was, the last name was Moore.
Mm-hmm. Roy Moore?
Roy Moore. Mm-hmm. And I was just disgusted by my party to back someone that's a known pedophile. And it's that blunt, that blatant, that no matter who they put in the seat, as long as it's one of our guys. And I disagree with that. I fully disagree with that. And I don't think many people really can get behind that or stand behind that. And so that was the tipping point. The next day I started to get signatures on my petition, because there's something wrong, not only within politics as a whole, which there is, but also within the parties themselves, to where if you're not far right or far left, for the most part, you don't have a chance. As for myself, I'm a moderate. I'm a fiscal conservative, which means that I don't overextend my finances. I don't overextend my spending. I don't buy the things that I don't need. I don't go running up credit cards. And that's something that we haven't been doing. So we definitely need a change. And I think that more so than anything, we need to start having conversations opposed to just fear tactics and rhetoric to to pit one another against each other. That's counterproductive. It's counterproductive for our community, it's counterproductive for our state, it's counterproductive for our country. And it's been said far before me, and I don't know if you've seen this or read this, but I commented at that debate that one of the most unpatriotic things there is partisan politics. And when you choose your party over the country, there's something seriously wrong with that. And I don't condone the fear tactics that both sides use on the fence. I mean, neither of us are innocent, but at the same time, it's only going to work for so long. And back in 2009, that's going back a ways after Republicans lost quite a bit, at the Republican National Convention, they had to get themselves in order. And they had the conversation that what we need to do is be more inclusive. We need to invite other populations, other communities. We need to invite minorities to become part of the Republican Party. And that was a pretty strong talking point. However, on the other hand, you can choose to go the other direction. And unfortunately, that's the direction that the party went. And it started with the Tea Party. And the Tea Party started off as something that was reasonable and noble, and they had a good purpose, but just went too far with the anger and the fear-mongering and decisive rhetoric. And I mean, for those that feel that strongly, well, the 3rd District has 5 candidates that'll be more than happy to take those votes. I'd be happy to have those votes as well. However, I'm really going for the working class. I'm going towards the moderates. And the majority of the people in this country, even in the 3rd District, are moderates. They're maybe a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left. And some things they can agree on as far as being conservative, some things they can agree on as far as being liberal. And that's a very pragmatic place to be.
Let me interrupt you there because we're going to run out of time, and I want to get an idea about specifically, obviously, you have very strong ideas about from where you would like to lead. What are some of the things that you would like to attack if you were successful in getting the nomination and winning in the general? What are some of the things you would like to try to achieve as a member of Congress?
As a member of Congress, I actually have 4 bills I wrote down just to have an idea of what direction I'm going. And one bill in particular would be one that I have labeled as Goose Gander Bill. And what's good for the goose is good for the gander. That being said, the bill specifically states that the members of Congress, the House and the Senate, are obligated to the same health insurance as the lowest population of the country, as far as whether it be the ACA, whether it be emergency care, whether it be Medicaid, which I don't think anybody of Congress would qualify for.
As 2020 begins, it is impossible to ignore how much of this year will be consumed by all things politics. While the presidential race will dominate, races like this one for Congress will be extremely important. And with unsettled political landscapes around, the 3rd may not be the only one to watch. Next week, legislators return to Lansing. And believe it or not, we have 2 more candidates to introduce you to. I hope you'll join us every Sunday morning at 10 o'clock on Wood TV for To The Point.